Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you kindly as ever for stopping by. I'm always grateful. If you haven't seen a couple of filmed interviews, one was with Nikhil Hira covering the tax side. He's the tax partner at Deloitte East Africa, and then I was part of a seminar in the evening, and I was talking about macroeconomics, the global economy, and Nikhil spoke as well, Fred and others, and we've uploaded Fred's component where he's talking about taxes again in the same region. Macro thoughts, Ladbrokes, Brexit chances hit all-time high of 43%. Sterling volatility now higher than the 2008 crisis that crashed the world economy and financial system. I wrote the piece over the weekend, Will the UK exit the European Union? The gap between Brexit and Remain has narrowed dramatically over the last few days. This is Betfair. And of course we had yesterday's Leader in the Sun, which was like that very big and famous headline, last man to leave England, please switch off the lights, which promptly, I think, was irresponsible in large part for winning Mrs. Thatcher the election. But this is that the UK should exit. Carl Sharrow, who's very tongue-in-cheek and witty, we don't have to leave the EU abruptly. Maybe we can move out for a while and start dating other regional economic groups, see how it goes. Germany's 10-year Bund yields dropped below zero for the first time in history. I'll put up a chart that Holger's posted. And then a very interesting picture from Eric Scott Hunt's chart of every large sudden move in the S&P 500 futures since 2006. Home thoughts. Yesterday I went to the Mathaiga Club for a function about Brexit. I took this photograph of the evening as I was entering the club. Chris Foot, who was he was the proponent of Remain, was facing down Graham Shaw, who was the proponent of Brexit, and rather ironical because he is the chairman of the British Chamber of Commerce. Chris Foot said immigration is the bête noire of the Brexit debate, and he's right. I put up a photograph that I took, a panoramic photograph, so you can see the room. Most enjoyable. Carl Sharrow again, who I've been reading of late, obviously. When I was a kid, they told us that the dead people in heaven can see everything we're doing. So I started carrying an umbrella all the time. When I was a kid, my mother told me that all the stars in the sky were people who had passed on, and that they looked over us, and that's why I should not worry when she was gone. She would point at a shining star and say, see, that will be me. Then this horrible incident in Florida took me back to John Donne. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. And then Kenneth Roth, of course, amongst others, put up some of the faces behind the horrible number of people killed in Orlando. Before the nightclub shooting, the FBI pursued questionable Florida terror suspects. This is a report on The Intercept. The attack on a gay club in Orlando in which 50 people were killed and more than 50 wounded, now the largest mass shooting in US history, demonstrates how potential threats are escaping the FBI's vast counter-terrorism dragnet. The Orlando shooting isn't the first case to raise this question. In 2011, When the FBI investigated Boston Marathon bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev, agents did not deem him a threat. Instead, at about the same time, the Boston FBI started a 9-month-long sting operation against Rezwan Firdaus, listen to this, who had no weapons and no connections to international terrorists, and whose mental wellness had deteriorated so much he was wearing adult diapers at the time of his arrest on terrorism charges. And the Russians, of course, were taking it as an opportunity to be very aggressive failure of US intelligence. Our average attention span has decreased 1/3 since 2000, 8 seconds, now less than a goldfish's, apparently. It's pretty extraordinary. Political reflections, outgoing NATO chief, Russia poses an enduring existential threat to the US, its allies, and the international order. I just wonder if Russia's not just a decoy, and if it isn't, I think the US is the US is pivoting in 2 directions, and you really can't do that. Look at the difference between the messaging of Hillary Clinton. America has always been a country of we, not me, and we've always been stronger together, compared to the Donald Trump. What has happened in Orlando is just the beginning. Our leadership is weak and ineffective. I called it and asked for the ban. Must be tough. 2 different tones completely. And then, according to Lakota Man, this was not the most horrific mass shooting in US history. That was December 29th, 1890, Wounded Knee, where 200 Sioux were massacred. Put up a photograph of Fidel Castro, because he is a totemic figure, and it was a pretty arresting photograph. Look at this photograph of President Kenyatta, President Dos Santos of Angola. Dos Santos looks as if he has a liver or a kidney problem. Negative yields are like a supernova that will explode one day, said Bill Gross. It's not wrong. The Chinese yuan falls past a January low, now at the weakest in 5.5 years. Currency markets, the euro up a little bit at 112.27. Dollar index 94.93. Japanese yen 106.26. Swissy 0.9638. When I looked last, the pound has had a little pop high. Got below 141 yesterday. It's now above 141.91. The Australian pretty strong as well, 0.7400. India rupee 67.205. South Korean won 1174.75. The Rial 347.94. Egyptian pound 887.97. And then the South African rand, when I looked last, 1529.85. Sterling, let me put up a 6-month chart. We're up at 141.90. We've had a 76 tick bounce today, but I think my target remains, and it's been there a long time actually, 136.50. And I think then if we get a vote to exit, we look at 125. Euro dollar, let me put up a 3-month chart. Trading 112.28 area, has softened in line with the negative yield curve structure. Gold, a little bit softer, 12.81. Oil watch, EIA forecasts OPEC revenues in 2016 at a 10-year low of $341 billion, down from a 2012 peak of $920 billion. Just think about that. Crude oil, I think you continue to sell rallies now. I think it's turned. Look at this, chocolate mixes with Brexit, cocoa trades in pounds in London and in dollars in New York. Big arbitrage opportunity. This is Javier identifying that. The hottest commodity right now is fodder for pigs, according to Bloomberg Markets. According to Bloomberg as well, foreign investors are now beginning to flock to Myanmar. Look at the FDI infographic. South African all shares is up 1.38% this year, but we're at a 13-week closing low. Dollar rand, I think, is on a softening trend. 1545 is the next target. Egyptian EGX 30 up 8.05% so far this year. President Buhari wrote a thought piece in the Wall Street Journal, spoke about the 3 changes Nigeria needs, saying Nigeria is at a crossroads. Just over a year ago, people voted in a historic democratic election to end corruption and business as usual, opting instead to build an economy that delivers for all Nigerians. The old order was based on an unsustainable commodity supercycle, while the boom had many positives, contributed to Nigeria becoming Africa's largest economy. It fostered an epidemic of corruption and inefficiency. Foreign businesses and financial institutions also benefited. Some people spent and sometimes hid the sums abroad, lifted by the rising tide of oil exports and dollar revenues. We're now living in a new world of low energy prices. The economy has slowed, unemployment and inflation have jumped. Our solutions must be in proportion to the challenges. Restore trust, saying we've begun to tackle endemic corruption and mismanagement. Fighting corruption is not enough. We need accountable government. Rebalance our economy in a world of lower oil prices and dollar revenues. Nigeria's growth and job creation will be led by the private sector. Regenerate growth. We must reposition our economy by attracting investment in domestic industries and infrastructure. I am optimistic that our actions are providing the breathing room Nigeria needs during this period of fundamental change. And he's saying one of our main achievements this past year has been to unite regional and global allies to push back Boko Haram. What we do in the next 3 years to build an economic bridge to Nigeria's future will be just as important for bringing lasting peace and prosperity. On the 8th of February, I wrote a pretty hard-hitting piece when I said that the President of Nigeria is risking it all on a bet on a single number in a game of roulette. Those are the odds. That remains the elephant in the room, although we're expecting an announcement as early as today. This is around the Nigerian Naira FX policy. I said Nigeria will surely contract in 2016, and not least because its president is determined not to devalue the Naira. He seems to have moved the dial a little bit in this regard. I said the curve of history, from Soros skinning the Bank of England in 1992 to the Mexican peso crisis in 94 to the Thai baht crisis in 98 and many more too numerous to mention, confirm that maintaining an artificial foreign exchange rate is a fool's errand and eventually carries the risk that the breakdown spirals out of control and can become seriously disorderly. I said he's such a brilliant president, but I find it just extraordinary that such a brilliant president would risk it all on this bet on a single number in a game of roulette. Those are the odds. Nigeria's inflation rate continues to soar. It rose to 15.6% in May. Nigerian crude oil production fell in May to 1.37 million barrels per day, almost a 30-year low. The Nigerian oil share is down 5.61% this year. Yields exceeding 10% may lure investors to Ghana's Eurobond sale. Ghana's trying to sell $1 billion. Now, this is after Madame Lagarde stepped in, so she's giving them some cover. I think at 10% they will be sold, but there are many challenges in Ghana. Heads into presidential and parliamentary elections as early as November. Will use proceeds of a new Eurobond to help plug its 2016 budget deficit, which the IMF said last month could reach 4.8% of GDP. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 11.89% this year. President Museveni commended President Kubebea for neutralizing the ADF and FDLR forces. I wrote over the weekend, I was writing about Kenya and about the contestation we're seeing on the street. And I said President Kubebea has outwitted Moishi Katumbi by removing him from the street and the Congo entirely. I flicked the channels and came across a report from the Congo where opposition presidential hopeful Moishi Katumbi had been leading the street against a third term for Kubebea. Birthday boy President Kubebea is constitutionally barred from running for a third term, and Katumbi has set out his stall now and is a formidable adversary. In fact, the numbers were building, and Katumbi must have been thinking this might just turn into a tsunami. President Kubebea, however, outwitted Katumbi by removing him from the street in the Congo entirely. might well prove a cleverly administered technical knockout. The Central Bank of the DRC has slashed its GDP forecast for 2016 to 5.3% compared to 6.9% last year. Fast food, flashy cars and shopping malls, Africa hurtles into obesity crisis. With more money in their pockets, Africans are eating more fast food and adopting more sedentary lifestyles, leading to a surge in obesity and associated diseases like diabetes and cancer, experts said on Tuesday. It's quite a story, actually. Kenya, I was quoted as saying the political economy has extracted a big pound of flesh from Kenya Inc. Al Jazeera has got a link for a bunch of photographs of Kenyans protesting, anti-opposition remarks, protesters block roads, indulge in arson, after pro-government MP appears to say opposition leader can be killed. In the video shot at a party over the weekend, Korea apparently refers to recent opposition demonstrations for changes in the Electoral Commission, which the protesters accuse of corruption and bias. He should be careful because he can as well bite a bullet, Korea says. We won't be disturbed by one person. He can bite a bullet. We bury him the next Monday. They, Odinga supporters, throw stones for 1 week and life continues. Isn't it so? Street protests will hurt. 6% growth forecast is what I wrote on the 6th of June. Return to Pulverilia. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form, not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor, machine of attack, in other words, a producer of speed. The street, in my opinion, is a tinderbox, and it has become a major area of contestation, political contestation across the continent. And then I take the quote which I used in my article from Bloomberg: if there is an increase and intensification of the protests for another 6 months, Kenya is going to face a very difficult situation. Kenya shilling 101.198, Nairobi all shares down 0.19% this year. NSE 20 is down 6.34% this year and closed at a 19-week low. Once again, thank you for stopping by.